The following is a presentation of Moonlight Media Works. Welcome in to another edition of the Collins Janus Show, a Moonlight Media Works production. See you like that? I thought that was clever. Look, short hair. I'm back to a short hair look. Trying to get a chop for all the hot weather we got coming around and all the things heating up in our world these days. Lots of things going on, lots of things in the sports calendar, lots of things outside. A lot of pollen. God, I hate that stuff. It's everywhere. In the Carolinas here, it is just hell. I mean, it is green hell as far as the eye can see. We got controlled burns going on in the state. We got haze. We got pollen. We got a little bit of heat. Then some days it turns 50. I don't know what to do anymore. I can't know. When I wake up nowadays, I have no idea whether to put jeans on, to put shorts on, to put a parka on, put a N95 respirator on, to walk outside, breathe in the non-smoggy burn pollen air. I don't know what the hell to do anymore. Your guess is as good as mine. But I do know a couple things. Couple of tree things, as they said in The Sopranos. I do know today is opening day, and the Boston Red Sox, my Boston Red Sox, are playing in Cincinnati. And, it is a sad commentary on how bad Major League Baseball has bungled opening day for the fact that we gave the first game of the year a night game to Netflix between the Yankees and Giants, which went not well in my estimations. I think the overall efforts by Netflix so far to get into live sports have been very subpar. I mean, their sports documentary content has been subpar. Now they're trying to get into the fight game. They did that with the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight. Now they're trying to get in on baseball rights with some of these games. And I get their effort. They got the home run derby during the All-Star break now. I get what they're trying to do, but so far the execution isn't there. The talent was there. For some reason, Bert Kreischer was there on the broadcast. Here, you want a hot take? You can clip this for social media. I'm so fucking sick of him. I can't do it anymore. We get it, dude. You have no shirt on. You got a tummy. You're a comic genius. I mean, how does he think of it? I can't. I'm done, dude. I like a lot of comics that are friends with Bert, do a lot of roast and stuff with Bert. But, dude, I can't do it anymore with this guy. He's just everywhere. Leave everything alone. You don't have to be in everything. I get he likes to work, but Jesus, I mean, whoa, he took his shirt off and he talked about getting drunk. Wow, what a comic. Whoa, he laughed at his own joke. Ha ha ha, yeah, you're a real funny guy. I mean, when Barry Bonds is on a baseball broadcast and he's not the most insufferable person on it, that should tell you something. I'll give Barry credit. Barry didn't look like a complete and utter dick on that broadcast. Which he has a tendency to be and a tendency to have done over the years. And that's why he can't get a job in baseball in most places, because people think he's an asshole. And he is. There's documented examples of it. Jeff Perlman, who was on this show a couple weeks ago, wrote a whole book about what an asshole Barry Bonds is. So, I mean, it's not hard to figure out why people aren't like lining up around the block to go, Barry, come on in, work. You know why Mark McGwire could get a job in baseball? Because even as a cheater and who took steroids and did all that stuff and became pariah for breaking the Maris record and all that stuff, people still liked Mark McGwire. And admittedly, it was Tony La Russa and a couple of people with the Dodgers and the Padres. I think he worked for a couple of those teams. He was still liked by somebody. You have to be liked by somebody to get anywhere in life. And Barry Bonds, I mean, Sammy's likable, but Sammy Sosa can't get a job because he won't cop to the fact he did steroids. And I think he's slowly working back into the good graces of the Cubs. But you have to be liked by somebody. If you're not liked by anybody, you're not getting a job no matter how many home runs you hit, steroid or not. And you're also probably not getting the voters' vote for a Hall of Fame. Now, look, do I think that whole discussion needs to be put to bed once and for all? Do whatever, one way or the other. Either they're all in or they're all out. At this point, I don't care. Stop using David Ortiz to justify that argument, though, because there's no positive. There's the Ortiz positive steroid test is it's like fairy dust. It doesn't exist. It's out there in the ether somewhere. No one knows. It was a blind sample, and they never even clarified what he tested for. It was voluntary. Guys did it before they cracked down on all this stuff. I mean, so stop using Ortiz cheated, so everybody can get in the... That's not how this works. And yeah, the other thing is, even if that were true, even if what your point was saying, David Ortiz means a hell of a lot more to the game because he's not a jackass, and he's done a lot of good for the game. Barry Bonds hasn't done one thing good for the game of baseball other than for Barry Bonds. I mean, from the time he got into the college baseball, he's been a jackass for as long as he's been a player. I don't know an instance of somebody who likes Barry Bonds other than Jared Carrabis, who I love Jared, but I don't know what on earth his fascination is there. But no, it has nothing to do with a personality contest as far as that. Ortiz deserved to be in. He didn't. That test is such a sham BS situation. If you want to go look for it, find me the thing he popped for. That's the other thing. And that's the argument that people say with Bonds and a couple other guys. But there's documented things as to what they were tested for, what they found. Like for Barry, I believe it was like the clear, which is a Balco thing, which is, I think, a facility out in San Francisco that had it. And I mean, there's examples of, there are numerous cases of like guys like, McGuire and with Andro or Roger Clemens' personal trainer talking about stuff that he had given him over the years. Like there's enough fire around those sources, or there's enough smoke around those sources to be fire. So, I mean, at this point, I don't care if we put him in or not. Let's just move on from the discussion topic and either give him the day or not. I mean, we got plenty of that to go. I don't know how I got on this tangent, but this is how it works. MLB opening day was ruined because Major League Baseball sold it out to Netflix for game one, which is fine. Give them a primetime game. Give them big games. I'm excited for NBC's coverage this year. ESPN dropped the ball with it over on Sunday Night Baseball, and I get that. So I'm excited to see what NBC brings to the table, and I'm interested to see if Netflix can progress. I like the talent they had on the broadcast. I like Matt Vasgersian. I've always been a Vasgersian guy. So I'm fine with that. But we need to make sure that opening day is opening day. And I'm not a big stickler because I love night sports. I think night sports look the best. But opening day is day, as in day games, which means everybody needs to play on opening day. That's how it should work. It should start in Cincinnati. Let them hold the tradition with the parade and everything. Like, let's not completely kill everything for the bottom dollar. I mean, we're doing good as far as the game is going. I mean, we just came out of the WBC. We're still probably going to get a lockout at the end of this year. Let's enjoy this while we have it. We did the MLB season prediction show last week. If you haven't checked that out, it's up on YouTube. It hasn't gone up on Spotify and whatnot, but we'll rectify that for those that want to listen to it. But at the end of the day, it's these little things that baseball does to just cut themselves down just a little bit. And I'm not saying Netflix is a bad exposure situation, but God, like, just roll all the games out on Thursday, or that's how it should be done. Opening day, everybody plays, let's go. Day games up until the evening, at night. I understand you can't run them all simultaneously, but you could pretty much knock most of them out. And the fact that we're dealing with blackouts, like I can't watch the Red Sox here without the Reds TV subscription because they're in market for North and South Carolina. How? I have no idea. It makes no sense. Like, I even get Nesson here, but I can't watch the Red Sox versus the Reds without Reds TV. And again, I think what I ultimately think will happen at some point is every team will go to its own network. It will go to its own streaming platform or whatever else. So the Reds, the Padres, the Braves, a bunch of these teams will ultimately wind up there, and that's all you'll have to do. If you want to buy a team, you'll buy a team subscription for the year. And so, like, SNY, the Yes Network, Nesson, those ones proof of concept that they work, it works, everybody should do something like that. Comcast, like NBC with the Phillies and There are examples of still RSNs that work, but regional sports networks really took a nosedive when Diamond got bought out and or bought out all the Foxes and everything else and everything that's moved around in the last couple of years. It's a joke. And I'd really like to get to a spot now where we could... I don't want to play the game of I can't watch a team because I live in a state. Fans move everywhere. I'm a Red Sox fan in North Carolina. It is what it is. You didn't dictate who I rooted for. That's okay. But you shouldn't keep me from being able to watch a game, especially not when it's the Reds. It's the Reds. This is in Ohio. You got to go 6, 7, 8 hours the other way to get to Ohio, to where Cincinnati is. I've made the trip before. It's not bad, but it's not exactly close. And I love Cincinnati. I've been to that ballpark. I've been to Cincinnati. It's a very cool sports town. I love it. They do a great job, and they deserve to be the leader for opening day with what they've done over the years. So that's my diatribe about that. But fortunately, I was sitting here this week going, I don't know what, I haven't written out what I usually do during the week for story topics and other things that I want to talk about on this show. But I did have a few minutes before I did this, and I wrote down plenty of things to talk about. But it all comes back to college basketball, because right now we're still in the thick of the NCAA men's tournament known as March Madness. We are in the Sweet 16, the Huskies. Beloved Huskies still in it. Playing Michigan State tomorrow night. Going to be a lot of fun. I got to race home after work for that one. That'll be a lot of fun. There's some really good matchups still to go. You got Duke and St. John's. You've got, Arizona's still alive. Michigan's still alive. You got Houston still in this thing. Iowa State. There's a lot of really exciting teams still left to play, and it should lead to some really interesting games both tonight when this is recorded and tomorrow when you'll see this. There will be plenty of great games tomorrow as well. But the coaching carousel has heated up very quickly. I love when I get texts during a show, because I'll look over at it and I'll just completely lose my train of thought. I used to hate I had a coworker who would do broadcasts and would insist on everybody at this place being in a group chat, and he would basically be like, when I'm doing my thing up here, nobody text in the group chat. Like, okay, well, you insisted on us being in the group chat so we could do work, but you don't want us to text because it distracts you while you're doing the game. First of all, the easiest thing to do when you're broadcasting a sport, and I understand your father, husband, wife, daughter, doesn't matter. If you're distracted by it, there's this fancy little function called Do Not Disturb on your phone, where you can still see that you're receiving a text, but it doesn't buzz, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. That's great. If you don't want to be distracted at all by your phone, you take the phone like this and you just go, put it down, flip it upside down. But to get actively annoyed that people would be trying to do a job, and this guy would be like, well, while I'm on air, I don't want a single text in this chat. Get over yourself, dude. Learn to adapt or grow up. I don't know what to tell you. What a jackass. But again, I got distracted by it, but I don't tell anybody not to text me. I'll figure it out. I'm a grown up. I'll figure out to go, okay, put that over there. Not a big issue. I can look at it, go, whatever, figure it out. But back to the coaching carousel. We have a couple of blue bloods that might be looking for coaches. We know one is, another one might be, and Rick Pitino, head coach at St. John's, who's a multiple-time national champion, made an interesting comment that I'm going to read or allude to before I get into this discussion topic, which is to say that he sees no difference anymore between a blue blood and a non-blue blood when it comes to players in the modern age of college basketball. And, there's a lot of validity in that statement. I think the big thing that basketball media struggles with all the time is they like to assert everything out to being a blue blood or a non-blue blood. And for years it was, well, UConn can't be a blue blood. They haven't had a traditional history. And then they win back-to-back national titles and been kicking ass since Danny Hurley's been there. Not to mention the 3 titles Jim Calhoun had was like, well, they're not UCLA or Indiana. How can they be a blue blood? I'm like, Indiana and UCLA, I love Indiana on paper, but they haven't been good since the first Bush administration. I mean, what are we doing here? Minus one fun run they had with Cody Zeller and Victor Oladipo back in like 2011. What are we even doing anymore? And the fact that I mistook Frank Kaminsky for being at Indiana while he was at Wisconsin should tell you that Indiana basketball has become a non-factor for so long that you can't aspire, you can't say they're more of a blue blood or they're entitled to be higher up the food chain. Do I want Indiana to be good at college basketball? Hell yes, I do. I've been to Indianapolis. I've been to the state of Indiana. They love basketball there. They deserve to be good at both Indiana State, Indiana, Purdue, whatever. They're whatever. But I would love for Indiana to be good again at basketball. They have to earn that. They have to go get that. They have to go do that. But I mean, realistically, the conversation comes back to like UNC, Kentucky, Duke, Kansas. Now you can't deny UConn as a blue blood program because they have now done it with multiple coaches in my lifetime. So in my entire lifetime, UConn has been good. Minus a couple years in between. But like they have been in a elevated level since Calhoun took that program over and built it from nothing to what Kevin Ollie inherited and won a title with, and then later on with Danny Hurley. I mean, it's just the argument against is silly. But North Carolina went ahead and fired Hubert Davis. Now, on paper, that deal had to happen. Hubert Davis got further than any human being I've ever seen off of one tournament run. Hubert Davis is a UNC legend as a player and what he means to them. I get it. I understand that. And that's the problem with doing business with family. If you look at a guy like Hubert Davis' family, if you look at a team like the Carolina Hurricanes doing business with your franchise's greatest player and Rod Brindamore, that can be messy if you're not doing well. Fortunately for them, he's kicked ass ever since he's been a head coach. But for people like me, we were concerned, you bring the family in. We don't have that much family left. You banished all the other guys. They've all been run out of town. If you ruin this one, who the hell are we supposed to root for? And who are we supposed to identify with? Who are we supposed to come out and see get his jersey retired or be honored or celebrated at whatever point? I mean, there weren't that many team legends left after they'd all been run off or put in positions and fired. So you run the risk always. Now, granted, in the case of like a Rod Brindamore, it works out. In the case of a Kevin Ollie at UConn, former player, gets to be on the staff with Calhoun. Calhoun waits and makes sure he gets to inherit the job. And Ollie wins the title, but was clearly, overmatched for the job and ultimately not the guy to lead UConn into the promised land beyond that one title. And Hubert Davis went to a national title and beat Coach K twice in Coach K's final year. He knocked him out in the tournament. He knocked him out in his last game in that run against Duke earlier in the regular season. Like, he got those 2 wins, which I believe was pointed out on Ovies and Giglio when they had Bomani Jones on. Those are as 2 big of wins as there ever been in the history of that rivalry in a lot of ways. Because Coach K went out on his sword, but he took the sword through the chest in that in that tournament run. And again, that buys you a lot of leeway if you're a head coach at a program like UNC. But that's in the past now. And you can't be early exit, not threatening for the ACC and not doing all that while John Shire's doing what he's doing at Duke. That's unacceptable. Not in that rivalry. And winning maybe one every other year out of those 2 games a season doesn't help. So I think it was the right decision to go ahead and fire him. Now the question is, just how attractive is this job? And that's been the big discussion. I know a lot of people are talking about it from a perspective of they spent so much money on Bill Belichick and they can't do anything else. They don't have the money. First of all, I have never once looked at North Carolina and thought this program lacks money, especially when it comes to basketball. And I understand they reprioritized some things. They had to do things differently the way they were doing it NIL-wise at Carolina. Those things had to happen. Bill Belichick insisted that they happen for him to take that job and them to take this more seriously. This isn't the good old aw shucks days at Chapel Hill when we couldn't pay athletes. You have to be attractive at a financial level. Whether that's fair, foul, wrong, or indifferent doesn't matter. That's the way the game is played. And as Rick Pitino said, you're no longer leaps and bounds better than everybody just on name, blue blood status, facilities. Now, granted, the facilities at Carolina and all the Jordan brand influence and all that stuff still holds a cachet value to a young player. Playing at Chapel Hill, playing in the ACC, playing in the Triangle, that's still attractive. It may not be as attractive if the money's not there, but, I mean, the recruits weren't really the problem under Hubert Davis. I don't think Hubert Davis was the coach to lead those recruits. That's the problem. So now you have to turn your attention to hiring the next guy. And you need a guy outside the Carolina system. There's just not that many guys left from the Dean Roy tree that are worth a damn at this point. And you can look through the players and you look through guys that are your guys. And trust me, I put a lot of value in that depending on the program. And there's reason to have done that with the Dean Roy tree for as long as it was working out. But that's not the case anymore. And the way that Roy and Dean coach the game has changed. The game they coached all those years ago is not the same game anymore. They don't have the buy-in from guys anymore. Guys will leave at the drop of a dollar. We'll talk about a couple of things like that in a minute. But now you have to turn your attention to finding the next Carolina head coach. There's some interesting names on this list. Couple names outside of college basketball. Billy Donovan with the Chicago Bulls. Won those national titles at Florida. Hasn't been a college coach in many years at this point. But now more than ever, the NBA game down to the college game, paying players, understanding how to treat and interact with paid professionals, which is what they are, is a skill that's applicable down from the NBA to the college game. And I think if that was a move you want to make, there's certainly a track record of doing it. And I don't know. Like, you're safe in Chicago if you win 42 games and go 42 and 40, or like 41 and 41. If you just do that across 82 games a year, you're good. Because Jerry Reinsdorf has long given up on being a competitive owner in sports. So the Bulls is a safe job. Now, if you want to be challenged and you want to go and be back in the thick of it, get the blood flowing, then you take this job if it's offered to you and go from there. I will say the name that immediately came out from Brad Stevens, I never once bought. Brad took himself off the bench. He went up in the front office, and he's a great general manager, front office guy for the Boston Celtics. He's a great president of basketball. You know, he's got the vision. He won a title in Boston already. I think he loves that role. And I mean, yes, do I think he could still coach at a high level anywhere he wants? Yes. But that's what makes it hard. I don't know that he needs to go back to college to get that rush. He could do it on his own bench if he wanted to. He could go to another team if he wanted to. I mean, he's in a Pat Riley position. Like, Pat could sit up there forever and come down and coach and still do what he needs to do. Some other names at some prominent programs: Dusty May at Michigan, Tommy Lloyd at Arizona, Nate Oates at Alabama, Todd Golden, TJ Otzelberger, Golden at Florida, and Otzelberger at Iowa State. Those are all really interesting names. And for a team like a guy like Todd Golden, you wonder, could you even pry him away from a school like Florida where he's already won a national title and he's been a big deal? He's like, the basketball program right now at Florida has surpassed the football program, and unless they turn things around really quickly with the hire they made in the offseason for football, I don't see why you would step down from being at Florida to go to Carolina. Now, here's the thing. The Triangle is unique, even beyond the ACC. I grew up in the Triangle. I grew up outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. I grew up in a little area of Holly Springs, Fuquay-Varina. I grew up between those two cities. I spent the formidable years of my life prior to high school Basically everything from when I moved from Connecticut to there right before I moved into high school. I know the triangle like the back of my hand. I saw how it works from all those schools in the area between Carolina, Duke, NC State, and Wake Forest to a lesser degree. I saw how it works up front. That's a tough neighborhood to play basketball in. They don't mess around. They don't play. They don't care about your moral victories. They want victories over those schools, and they want to compete for the ACC and compete for a national title. Those are what those schools are interested in. Wake, like I said, probably a little less so nowadays, but that's just the way the game has broken out against Wake Forest. It's not a fair fight. It never has been. But you're going to have to get aggressive, and you have to get a home run higher, in my opinion. I don't think going with a guy like Jerry Stackhouse, that's the same thing as hiring Hubert Davis 2.0, in my opinion. Now, he's been under the bench, Steve Kerr with the Warriors, but he flamed out at Vanderbilt for a reason, when I think his best record at 22-15. That's not a guy I would hire. Mike Malone is the former coach of the Nuggets, is another name that's floated around. His kid goes to Chapel Hill. Might be a name you see him go after. They've gone after the non-conventional hires. They did that with Bill. It wouldn't shock me. If I had my druthers and I could pick anybody, I would probably pick Tommy Lloyd. I think Tommy Lloyd, has done some really good things. He was a trusted confidant of Mark Few. And one of the things that gets lost a lot of times is Carolina wants Carolina people. And I think now you can look beyond that tree and look at a guy like Mark Few and look at his tree and go, that's a place that I would want to, obviously you don't necessarily want to emulate Gonzaga because you're Carolina and you shouldn't have to. But you could definitely emulate the coaching style of a guy like Mark Few and look at a guy like Tommy Lloyd. Tommy Lloyd is single-handedly trying to change the narrative around a program in Arizona that's been nothing but chokers and frauds over the years. Deep tournament runs haven't always been the case for Arizona, despite all the glitz, glam, and number one seeds that they've had. So Tommy Lloyd might be a hire worthwhile. Dusty May and the same deal. Those guys are also, though, still in this tournament with a chance to win a national title. And if you do, then you're going to be even harder, and the price goes up to get one of those guys. Maybe a guy like Nate Oates, maybe he's run it as far as he's going to get it at Alabama, but then again, Alabama is a strong program. I will say this. The SEC, to me, doesn't matter for basketball as much as the ACC. It is developed into a really formidable, tough league in the last couple years. But as we're going to get to in just a second, I would still rather be in the ACC than the SEC. Not because I think the talent gap is such. I think the money is the bigger problem in the SEC versus the ACC. You can still lord over a couple teams in the ACC quite easily at one of the bigger programs. But in the SEC, everybody's got money. The SEC eats itself, where a team in the ACC can still rise above and succeed. Outside of like Florida last year, the SEC kind of ate itself in a lot of ways. Now, Auburn made a deep run. There are numerous teams that could still do that. Alabama's an example of that. But ultimately, it cannibalizes itself from the inside in the SEC. So I don't know that if I were a coach, I would want to be in the SEC if I could be in the ACC. And that brings us to the other coach that has departed a triangle-based program, and that's Will Wade, who made the move to go back to his old flame in LSU. He departs North Carolina State after one season where he cosplayed as Jim Valvano, did all the photo shoots, called up the ticket office, all the season ticket holders, kissed all the babies, shook all the hands, and then immediately dipped at the first opportunity to go back. And then they hired, people from McNeese that he wanted. Then they took a chance on him at McNeese after he was fired at LSU. Look, fundamentally, I get why he left. Money, NIL, contributions, going back, following executives that you want to be a part of and have, your ear and have your confidence and such, I get. But I also get how absolutely shameless, how shameful it looks to do what he did. I mean, and we're not that far removed from Lane Kiffin. And I said at the time I didn't care that Lane Kiffin did that. LSU was a better job than Ole Miss. That's the case. Where I actually disagree is, and I like LSU, and I think they could definitely be better at basketball than they've been. And this is certainly a move to improve upon that in hiring Will Wade in this modern landscape of NIL and the modern college basketball game. I think State is uniquely in a position, and my opinions of NC State are long documented. Even without this show having existed since only February, I have been on record time and time again being no fan of the Wolfpack as far as those that I grew up around and my friends and family that know this about me and the institutions I've represented those opinions on know that my opinion of NC State is what it is. It's what happens when you root for certain programs in the state of North Carolina that do not abide by the hierarchy and structure that has been laid upon the state by a couple of those schools in the Triangle, and we all just have to bow down. Yeah, that doesn't work for me, brother. But at the same time, do I feel that the better job to me right now is still NC State than LSU? And it has nothing to do with money. Now, money will definitely help you, but if you succeed at State in basketball and you succeed in the Triangle, that's a much bigger opportunity. It's a much bigger flex, and it's a lot bigger achievement than if you do it at LSU. And let's face it, the path actually right now is easier because the middle of the ACC is so confused and misguided. Everybody, this year you saw Virginia, you saw Louisville. Those guys make the picture along with Duke, along with Carolina, along with Clemson. But that's what I'm talking about. The programs like Clemson, the programs like Louisville, the programs like, Florida State. There's still a lot of middling in there that you could get around with a really good coach, like a Will Wade. And I think if he had stayed, he probably would have elevated that program into the 4 or 5 in the ACC, which to me is better than being where LSU is going to be, I think, for the coming year or two, which is probably closer to 7, 8, bottom of the middle group of the SEC. Because Florida's better. You've got Auburn that's a mess right now. You've got Alabama who's better. You've got strong middle-tier programs up and down like Tennessee and other ones in the way. It's just not desirable to me other than the money. And I get the money is what made the move. It's the same reason we're talking about Lane Kiffin jumping from one SEC school to another. That's a job that makes sense to me every way you look at it, was to go to LSU over Ole Miss. Because Ole Miss is just not going to match what LSU brings you in exposure, money, resources, facilities, athletes. It's just not. It's just the way it is. And look, I think Will Wade will actually get LSU pointed in the right direction. I just think it's a really chicken shit move to do it the way he did. But I don't care. I'm not crying for anybody in Raleigh because of that. They knew who they got in bed with, and that's the part I don't understand. Is the reaction of, oh, I can't believe he would do such a thing. Now, some of the State fans are smart. Some of them, quickly recognize, look, man. You took someone off the street like that. Can't expect them to be wife material. It happens. And I mean, all those jokes are made with Lane Kiffin. The difference is Lane Kiffin is better than Will Wade. But I don't know. It's a messy situation. And I don't know where the hell you hire that next head coach. Because you're going to now compete with possibly North Carolina and possibly Kansas if Bill Self decides that this is time to wrap it up. There's a lot of rumor going around that one might be available, and that might be up for grabs as well. So you got a couple of those quote-unquote blue bloods. See how many times I've done it, quote-unquote, programs that are up for grabs and could be up for grabs in this coaching cycle. And all those names I just listed, one of them moves out of those programs, then you have another high-level program that gets involved. Now, if you poach one from the NBA, it's a different story. I just think it's very interesting. And it circles back to where I started this topic with, which was Rick Pitino's comment that it's no longer about the who's who. It's a matter of what you can bring as a coach and what you can bring money-wise. And it's why St. John's with Rick Pitino had the coach, had enough of one of those two items to get players invested, and they've won in the Big East in an era where UConn has multiple national titles. They've been successful since Rick Pitino's been back there. because of what he brings to the table. And you have to have a coach that can do that. If you don't have the money to match, you better have a coach that's an ace. Because if you have the other way around, you can have the money and not have the coach. You can't not. Here's how I'll break it down. I just figured this out as I was saying this, and it's going to sound silly the way I wound it all up. Here it is. You cannot have the money, but you can't not have the coach. You got to have the coach if you don't have the money. Because if you have the money and you don't have the coach, then you're just wasting money, and that pisses your donors off. If you have the coach, you can elevate the money a lot easier than the other way around. You can't make a slow horse run fast when it comes to coaching. And I think North Carolina learned that, and State's going to now have to figure out where they go from here. So it's very interesting. It's a big topic this week. If you want an insider's perspective, go listen to Ovies and Giglio. Joe Ovies was a radio host when I was growing up with Adam Gold that I listened to religiously. It was part of religion down there. A 99.9 FM, The Fan, for all those years. Growing up, going to bed, I had that thing on my clock radio going to bed is like a middle schooler. I would listen to Joe Ovies and Adam Gold, or not obviously at night unless they had the replay, but I'd listen to them, listen to the Hurricanes in bed. It was great back in the day. And Ovies and Giglio are doing their show. Adam Gold's still doing his show. There's a lot of great sports media up in Raleigh or in the Triangle, and if you want a better insider's perspective, I definitely recommend you go check those guys out. One last major topic before we get to what's got my attention this week is a discussion that came from the Dale Jr. Download and their host, Dale Jr., that's his podcast, and he owns Dirty Mo Media, the company that airs the show and everything. And his producer, I believe his name is Travis Rockhold, or I believe that's his name, used to work, I believe, on ESPN with Marty and McGee and a couple other programs. Now he's been at Dirty Mo doing that, and he also works with Denny Hamlin. Came out with about the absolute dumbest take I have ever seen in the NASCAR universe, and that's saying something. When you understand that NASCAR is just full of the dumbest DARF takes. And for those that don't know what a DARF is, allow me to break it down. D stands for dumbass or dumb. Yeah, I screwed it up. He brought forth the worst argument I have ever heard in NASCAR, and it's a sport full of DARFs. And if you don't know what a DARF is, it's a dumbass race fan. That's a DARF. And this is about the DARFest take I've ever heard, if that's the way I choose to break down that acronym, in saying that the NASCAR Hall of Fame, located just over that way, about a couple miles that way of me, should be reserved only for drivers that won in the Cup level of NASCAR. For those that are uninitiated with NASCAR, NASCAR works like this. The Cup Series is the top series with a couple of developmental feeder series for some younger drivers, as well as some other drivers that don't have the money to compete in the Cup Series. That's the important distinction, folks. It's not minor league baseball, because the guys at Major League Baseball don't go play in the minor leagues just because they don't have the money to play at the major league level. They play because they have to get better or they have to rehab. In NASCAR and in racing in general, you will see guys have a top series that pays the most. That's the most expensive to run, but they will run other series because of the money and the opportunities to win and do other things. So NASCAR does not abide by other stick and ball sports. And after we spent the last couple of years saying, don't treat us like a stick and ball sport, don't treat us like a stick and ball sport, when you bitch about there being a NASCAR playoffs versus a point system for a season-long champion. Like, don't tell me you want to be treated differently than a stick and ball sport and then turn around and say we should be treated in our Hall of Fame by like a stick and ball sport. That's rich, especially coming from the guy who works with Denny Hamlin, who's in Michael Jordan's pocket, basically being like, this is all the things we have to change in NASCAR because this is what's happening and I'm in charge and we won the court case and we determine everything. That's fine. I love MJ. I'm glad he's in the sport. I'm not one of those people that can't see that he brings something to the sport of NASCAR. But what I can't stand is Denny Hamlin, who's a NASCAR lifer, just acting as if everything we've ever done is stupid, wrong, we need to change it, and it needs to happen because I'm the one saying it and I have Michael Jordan behind me. That's bullshit. But for one of his podcast, coworkers and cronies to come out here and basically insinuate that the Hall of Fame should only be made up of guys that won at the cup level is absolute and utter bullshit. Because the thing about the NASCAR Hall of Fame is it's not just the drivers, it's the crew guys, it's the promoters, it's the broadcasters, it's team owners. There are all these different things that make up NASCAR's Hall of Fame. And NASCAR's Hall of Fame is representative of all the series of NASCAR, even including some of the weekly series, some of the modified different lower level series that run on regional short tracks. They all deserve to be recognized. To me, the NASCAR Hall of Fame, to use a stick and ball sport, because that's how we have to describe it for this one, the Hall of Fame that NASCAR should emulate is the Basketball Hall of Fame, and it continues to do that because basketball does not decipher between college and pro. They're all involved in the Hall of Fame. Jim Calhoun is in the same Hall of Fame as Pat Riley, and Mike Krzyzewski's in the same Hall of Fame as, Michael Jordan. They don't overlap, and I guess Red Auerbach should have been the comparison there. You've got players that contributed at all levels that make their way into the Hall of Fame in basketball. And I think in NASCAR, you can't tell me that in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, formerly the Busch Series, formerly the Xfinity, whatever series, the Busch Grand National Series, if you want to get technical and do all those different things, or the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Those are three established brands, some of which, by the way, even outdraw IndyCar and F1 races in the United States over the last decades. So it's not like it's just some piddly little minor league system that nobody cares about. Not when you got like top tier drivers like Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, guys that win on Sundays, winning on Saturdays and Fridays for the last 10 years. That's part of the sport. It's part of racing. It's different than any other sport. Racing can't be judged like those other sports. So the best at running those respective series have to be recognized, because here's the other thing. It's not like the guys that are dominating in those lower series are bad at racing a race car or racing in their respective discipline. Ultimately, NASCAR does have a glass ceiling, and guys that run some of those other series, that's their career. A prime example, and this is where the conversation started, was a driver like Justin Allgaier. Justin Allgaier might be one of the greatest Xfinity drivers of all time. He had very bad, limited opportunities in the Cup Series, and that comes down to money and sponsorship. Money, sponsorship, and team. Those are things that a driver can't necessarily influence if he doesn't bring it with him when he comes into the sport. And you'll see numerous amount of these little punks that get into a car at 18 or 17 that have mommy and daddy money that elevate right up into the top level of the sport, even though they can't hold a steering wheel. And they get it, and that's a part of it, and I can't argue it because it's money and it's the way the world works. I'm not going to sit here and bitch about it forever. I could do it all day. But what bothers me is when it comes to the expense of the guy who's more talented that doesn't have it. I'm a merit-based believer. I want that to be the case in all forms of life. It doesn't happen. But in a sport, I certainly want the merit to elevate over the dollar. And that's the problem. In NASCAR, it can't always. In racing, it can't, because racing costs a lot of that. But to tell me then that those guys who are the best at what they do, we're not just putting any guy that wins an Xfinity Series race or an O'Reilly's Auto Parts Series race or a Craftsman Truck Series race in the Hall of Fame. Like a guy like Ron Hornaday is the greatest Truck Series driver of all time. He raced in all three levels of NASCAR. He raced at pretty much every level of NASCAR there is. He didn't have the greatest opportunities in the top levels, but he found his niche in the Truck Series, and he made a career out of being the greatest Truck Series driver of all time. I mean, and, Dale Jr. agreed with this point, because Dale Jr. made a lot of his career and has made a lot of his business workings in the Xfinity Series. He won multiple championships in the Xfinity Series, won a bunch of races in that level, and has owned the most successful team in the Xfinity Series for over basically 10, 15, however many damn years it's been at this point. So for Travis to come out with that kind of take and expect, because Denny Hamlin agrees with you and you got Kenny Wallace to agree with you, Kenny Wallace and Denny Hamlin, I respect what they do. I'm not a fan of Denny. I've always liked Kenny for what Kenny was. And I grew up watching Kenny on NASCAR race day built by the Home Depot, and I respect their opinions. even if I don't agree with Denny on most anything. But they have as much a right to be wrong as I have a right to be wrong, and I think they're both wrong in saying that if it's not the NASCAR Cup Series Hall of Fame. That's not how it was dictated. The way it should be looked at, anybody who contributes to the greatness and the bolstering of the success of NASCAR, and that goes from promoter all the way up to driver, TV, production, whatever it be, they deserve to be enshrined and recognized in that Hall of Fame. Otherwise, why even bother? Because we've run through most of the Cup guys already, and we're not going to have another really good group of guys like that for a while. So you need to recognize the people that helped elevate this sport. Because unlike the other major four sports in this country, NASCAR is a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of sport. It had to work really hard to get where it was, to get a foothold in this country, and to succeed for as long as it did in that prime window from the 90s to the mid-2000s. And it's still, the top drawing form of auto sport in the United States, even after all the tries and efforts of F1. Now, globally, it's bigger, and I get that, and I don't care to walk down that road with anybody. But NASCAR still means an awful lot, and it should be to the people that helped make it that. And that talks for all the levels that contribute to NASCAR. The regional series, the legends of the short tracks, the legends of different disciplines of NASCAR-sanctioned racing. And the Hall of Fame was smart when they opened to make sure that that was the case. But because some producer with a take who rallied up a couple other people to agree with him is actually getting dragged on Twitter and everything else for it, that shouldn't change it. And it shouldn't change how we look at things going forward. NASCAR always has to be judged differently, and I'm not about to have it judged by those kind of rigid BS standards that he laid out in his argument. Whew. I think I've wrapped up all my anger. Now, for the final segment this week, it's a topic we love. It's our favorite segment. It's what's got my attention this week. This is the segment where we shine a light on something that I was fascinated by, whether it's something I listened to, something I saw, something I watched, something I participated in. I like to showcase a lot of those. Now, this week, I've kind of been doing a lot of TV watching around the basketball and around Major League Baseball and such, especially to wind down. But I've been catching up on some things that I've been woefully behind. You saw on last week's podcast, I talked about Chernobyl, the HBO series. I watched Ted, the Peacock series. This one was a movie that I watched on HBO, and it's a movie called Sinners, which just did big numbers at a lot of the award show. Michael B. Jordan winning for Actor of the Year for portraying two brothers in this movie about, Southern-based, Clarksdale, Mississippi-based juke music kind of environment. It was a juke club back in the day for like blues music and other forms of Southern soul, there's a lot of layers to the musical influences, but the blues is the big thing to come out of Clarksdale, Mississippi. I'm a huge fan of so many of the great Clarksville blues legends. And that's originally what got my intrigue, is I saw that it was focused around, the old story for those that aren't aware is that the great blues legend Robert Johnson went down to the crossroads down in Mississippi and sold his soul to the devil, so to speak, for his musical capabilities. And it's a big part of the blues lore and mythology is this idea that Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil. And throughout the music, there's numerous ties to that story and to the story of the spirits of the past and generations of people that grew up in Mississippi, in a very heavily populated area for many years of sharecroppers and people that were freed slaves and so many other things. And that's where the blues music really comes from. And it has obviously evolved over the years, but it's still, more than probably any other musical genre, is tied back to its initial roots in the deep south of the United States, particularly in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which I guess is probably ground zero for the blues overall. If you're trying to do it on a roadmap and figure it out, that's where you want to go. That's where a lot of the figures come from. So they told a story of these two brothers, and I'm not going to spoil the whole movie, but it's obviously been out for a year. I was late to the party. I'm not generally interested in the not gory, but the horror kind of vampire monster, supernatural kind of spiritual stories that kind of play itself out. Like I'm not a big vampire or zombie guy. I think some of those are tired and worn out. But what made this movie unique to me, obviously, is the talent that they put on screen. The cast was phenomenal for this movie. Michael B. Jordan, who I obviously discovered through Creed, which was the first pairing with him and Ryan Coogler, who's another phenomenal young director who has been like shaping Hollywood for the last several years with some of the choices he's made, especially in the projects he's done with Michael B. Jordan as both a director and a producer. And to me, and it's based in a story that I love because I'm fascinated by the lore and the legends of the blues. It features contributions of one of my favorite young guitarists in music today, Christone Kingfish Ingram. You've got several other great blues luminaries. Buddy Guy is in the movie. He plays a role in this. He plays a role in the soundtrack. And first of all, the soundtrack was phenomenal because it's obviously pulling from that kind of cultural blues influence in the music there. And they went and did the homework, and they did a lot of really good research and learning from that area about how to do it. And they got like a guy like Kingfish, who's obviously tied and rooted into that story of being from Clarksdale and growing up in a modern age where the blues has kind of been marginalized as a musical genre. Probably always was, but even more so now by pop music and rap and a bunch of other things. But he's still got a younger influence. So he's grown up on, not just the legends of B.B. King and whatnot, but enjoys like some of the rap and pop music that's existed. So he's a younger interpreter of the blues is probably the best way to describe it, but still grounded and rooted in that. So, and I think that's probably the best way to describe this is it's got those grounded reality of this period of music from the 30s and, that part of Mississippi, while also featuring, the supernatural, deep spiritual theories about the devil and, vampires and things like that of that nature that, a lot of people could get behind and be like intrigued by. And I will say this, the first few minutes, the first 20 minutes or so, you're trying to figure everything out, piece it all together. And my brain works like that. So like that. But from the 35-minute mark of that movie on, you're locked in. And I mean, it picks up and it doesn't let you go. It has you like this the entire time. So I have to give credit where credit's due. I wasn't sure if I was going to love it. The trappings around the movie that I just laid out to you were enough to get me in the door. But once I got in, it was worth the time. It was a phenomenal movie. I wish I had seen it in a theater. I'm kicking myself about that. I saw it at home. And I did have to stop and start it because of the way everything's just worked recently. But I think it was really well cast, really well directed. Cinematography was great. Some really interesting shot sequences there. They really did capture that part of Mississippi in kind of a almost, that you have to blend between reality and, the theories and the belief and the spirits and everything that are in that story that kind of play themselves out. But I do want to single out the other thing that I loved. The lead track from the soundtrack that they played, I believe it was at the Oscars, was sung by a guy named Miles Caton. I believe that's how you say his name. He's a young R&B singer, and he plays one of the characters who plays the blues in that movie. And I have to tell you, I was blown away because I didn't know him prior to this. I saw him play the song on the Oscars. Or it might have been the Grammys. I have no idea what freaking award show it was. But he did a phenomenal job. He came out, was backed up by Kingfish and Eric Gales and a bunch of other great players like Buddy Guy was out there, and they were all doing this. It was phenomenal. It's a phenomenal old school song. It was a song called "I Lied to You," and it's on the soundtrack. You can check it out. It blew me away. And there's parts of it that play itself out in the actual film itself. So that's what's got my attention this week. It was phenomenal. I was gripped. I couldn't get up after like the 35-minute mark. I had to finish it, and I was blown away with it from start to finish. Overall, it was a great story. And if you're looking for modern filmmaking done well at a high level that can be appreciated by different generations and genres of film, that's a perfect example of it. So there you go. That's what's got my attention this week. Late to the party as usual, but I had been on my radar, and I just finally sat down and forced myself to do it, and I'm glad I did. So there you go. Enjoy the rest of March Madness as we roll along. We'll be back next Thursday recording another one. It'll drop on Friday. We appreciate everybody that's tuned in to the podcast, whether it be on YouTube. If you guys are still listening to Spotify and Apple Podcasts, we appreciate you there as well. Spotify does give you the visual aspect, so we do probably push those a little bit harder because we take the time to shoot it. Might as well have you guys see it that way. So thank you all for however you are enjoying or following what we do here at Moonlight Media Works. But for this week's edition of Collins Janus Show, I'm Collins Janus. Thank you so much for listening to another production of Moonlight Media Works.
The preceding episode was a production of Moonlight Media Works.